Hey everybody, and welcome back to part 2 in my new series for my YouTube channel on guitar solo analysis. This week I'm going to dive right in and we're going to talk about one of my favorite solos of all time, and it was hugely influential on my playing, and it's Mark Knopfler's amazing, both solos actually on Sultans of Swing, both the middle one and the outro solo, really classic solos that are pretty easily identifiable. Most of us have heard them many times, whether on the radio, just listening to our own music collection. The reason I picked this one, it's, you know, at first glance, it's not the most technically challenging solo if you're just talking about the notes he's playing. There's nothing too crazy over the top, although there are a few tricky little runs that he does. But I think the brilliance of this solo, or trying to get this solo to sound correct, is really lies in playing something similar to Mark's right-hand technique. As most of you know, he doesn't use a pick. Now, I have never really studied Mark's playing really closely. I just, with this type of stuff, have more come up with my own workarounds in how I pick. So we're going to start off by talking a little bit about some of the techniques we might need as far as finger picking goes. And then we'll talk a little bit about the theory and what some of my opinions of what Mark might have been thinking while he was playing through the solo as far as the note choice and whatnot. So let's start off talking about the right hand. So a lot of times, most of the time actually, when finger picking, and when I say finger pick, I'm not talking about sort of the traditional just like, you know, arpeggiated type playing when we're playing chordally. I'm talking more towards the lead style of playing with finger picking, right? So there's a few techniques that I use here. And a lot of it's probably not as carved in stone, let's say, as say grabbing a pick, where I was mentioning to you in my first video in this series where I was covering George Lynch's Kiss of Death solo, where, you know, my pick style picking is just basically directional picking, right? If I'm on one string, I'm picking downs and ups, and then I usually just pick in whatever direction I'm changing strings in. There's always exceptions to this, right? But so if I'm changing strings downwards, I pick down. If I'm changing strings upwards, I pick up. And, you know, so that's very kind of carved in stone. Whereas with this style here, there are a few techniques that I use, but a lot of times it's not so simple as saying, well, I always hit this note with my thumb and I always hit this note with my fingers, right? But let's dive into a few of the things. One of the things you're going to see Mark do a lot in here, I don't know if I just knocked my guitar to mess, okay, is do this thing called chicken picking, right? That we've all heard of in country players use a lot of. And basically what that is picking a note. I basically try to keep my thumb very flat when I'm doing this, and also my index finger kind of flat, and that's going to fit in the string so that I could have, let's say I'm on my third string here. I don't know if it's super easy for you guys to see, but I could also have back here behind it my index finger, almost so if you look at it like this, there's an X between, you know, my, however you want to orient it, between my thumb and index finger. And that's going to allow me to pick a downstroke with my thumb and follow that up with an upstroke with my index finger, right? Okay, very little hand movement. I keep my sort of the heel of my thumb anchored down here, either on the guitar, depending on where I am, or on the strings, a lot of times on the strings just to help mute them out. So if you can get this kind of a thing going where you just maybe mute the strings out, and try to get a controlled motion of the thumb and index finger kind of alternating. Once you get that, then you can start deciding, once you have your sort of, whether you want to think of it as straight eighth notes or straight 16th notes, whatever, you know, in relation to whatever beat you're doing, you can then decide on your fretting hand, just kind of creating the rhythm by popping notes in and out. So here, I'll give you an example. I really didn't change anything up with this hand. I'm deciding, I'm keeping a steady beat, steady rhythm going with my picking hand, and I'm just deciding with this hand where I'm going to put those notes. even between strings I can do it. So that's one exercise we want to practice before jiving into this solo, is trying to get a good controlled movement between the thumb and index finger just in the same string. And then we can pop our notes, and you'll see how we'll apply it to the solo. The other thing I do a lot of times too is if I do have to do maybe something I would normally do as a sweep with a pick, that's when I'll maybe use my thumb, index, middle, and even ring finger and do almost like these rolls, right? Or this piano style where I'm going between thumb and maybe just double stops with my index and middle finger. The other thing is hammer-ons and pull-offs are going to be your friend here, because we obviously don't have the ability to go like, super fast tremolo, but be hard to mimic that. I'm sure there's some guys out there can do it. It's above my pay scale, but so if I am going to play notes on the same string, I'll try to kind of use the thumb and index as alternate picking. When I go to change strings, sometimes I'll just sweep with the thumb. Depending on the sound I want too. The thumb oftentimes is going to be a little mellower because I'm not going to snap the string so much with it usually, but I could. But I can get that kind of, with the index finger under the string, snap. So you can kind of see how I'm going between using the thumb, index, and middle. And there's no, like I said, necessarily any pattern. It's just going to depend on the notes I'm playing. And a lot of times, if I'm soloing with this type of thing, it might even affect my note choice just because of how it's going to be easier to lay the notes out with the way I'm able to pick because of the lack of pick in my hand, if that makes any sense at all. But so it's going to be going between those kind of techniques. So that chicken picking type of idea, right? Maybe just the thumb. Maybe going between thumb and index, or the rolls, or maybe the kind of claw style playing to get the double stops in there. So I don't know if that's a few examples of things we're going to use, but let's dive into the solo. Let's go over to Guitar Pro here. And this is a transcription I downloaded of Sultans of Swing a long time ago, and I just made a bunch of corrections to it. So to get it a little bit closer. I find that a lot of times, like I mentioned in my first video, I'll download a tab off the net just to get kind of a skeletal structure of the song, and then I kind of have to usually go through and fix things up. But first things first, what we want to know about this song is the chord progression. And something I did here, if you notice, is I put the chords in so that we can kind of see. This one's going to be very important because Mark played over the changes beautifully in this song. So we can kind of see, why he chose specific notes in line with particular chords, okay? So the chord progression of the first solo goes from a D minor, full measure on D minor, half a measure or 2 beats on C, half a measure or the final 2 beats of that measure on B flat, and then to an A. There are times where Mark implies an A seventh as well. The part in the song where he talks about Guitar George knowing all the chords, right? Sorry, right there. All right, so there's an A seventh, A flat seventh, which is just like a passing chord. Right, so he does imply A7 sometimes. We'll just keep it at A for now. So what does he do here? Well, if we look at this chord progression, the D minor, the C, and the B flat are all diatonic to the key of D minor, or its relative major F, right? However you want to think of it. But in this one here is a real tonal center being created, a tonality for our ear of D minor. See there, I threw the A7th in for the second measure of the A, right? So for the most part, we could get away with soloing in a D minor pentatonic. Now the only problem there is that when we get to the A, the C within the D minor pentatonic needs to become a C sharp, right? So we'll see how Mark dealt with that. But let's look at the first lick. So the first lick, really, he starts off just going into our normal kind of root pattern of our D minor pentatonic. It's fine. On that last bend, right, he's bending from a G up to an A. That's where the chord is going to change to a C. Right? Now, so that's our first phrase. Now, the B flat chord comes around. If you notice, the fifth interval of a B flat chord is F, and that's the note that Mark ends up landing on as the B flat comes around, right? So he bends up to an A note during the D minor chord because there's an A in the D minor, so he's really playing around chord tones. He drops this down back to a G before doing a little hammer-on pull-off between F and G, but the G note is part of the C chord. Then he lands on the F for the B flat, which are all chord tones, and then he does another little hammer-on pull-off and lands on an E, which is part of our A chord. So he's really thinking chord tones and not just thinking, oh, I'm going to play in the scale, although this would still be part of our D minor scale. Okay, so, and if you notice how I picked that, it's slow, right? So I'm just either going to use my thumb, maybe my index all the way through. I was kind of just anchoring my thumb here on the fourth string and using the index finger. Now, something interesting here. There's a little X. Now, these are the mutes where he's going to be kind of not fretting a note, but just getting a noise out of the strings, right? Now, this is a really common occurrence for Mark in his playing. He puts these wonderful little mutes in there, right? So how does he handle now the A chord? Well, what he does, if we look at the notes here, he goes from the 7th fret here on the A note on the D string to a C sharp on the G string, E, A, C sharp. He just outlined an A major arpeggio. So simple, right? We all know this kind of bar chord shape. He just did sort of the top 4 notes of that, right? The rhythm is important though. So he lands on the E, and if you notice, he holds that for 2.5 beats. So as we count, it'll be 1 and 2 and 3. He's going to hit that little mute. And the way that I do that is I'm muting with my left hand, the 3rd string, and then I use pick that with the index finger, and then bring the thumb back down. And that's where I maybe start to roll with my fingers here. Just use my thumb, index, middle, ring. Right? Does a little half step bend, kind of anticipating the fact that we're going back to a D minor chord, right? So far, so it's just an A major chord. So simple, he's really playing around the changes, as we can see. Those are all chord tones he's landed on, what gives it its beautiful melodic quality to it. Now, the chord progression starts over here. What does he do? Well, he goes to a little descending triplet on a D minor chord. There again, we all know this little shape of a minor bar chord. He's taking, again, the top string. So he's going from an A major ascending, and then descending on the D minor. It's really simple. And the nice thing about this is, like I was talking about before, if we can have some sort of theory behind the playing, it's going to help us to remember this, right? So when I'm playing this, I kind of think, okay, I'm in my D minor pentatonic D minor scale. I know A major arpeggio, D minor arpeggio. right? It's really nice stuff. So we can kind of see that and outline it really nicely. Then we're going to go into the C chord, but what does he do? Lands on a C note. So again, really going around the chord tones. Now he's going to anticipate the B flat coming up, and he goes within our D minor scale again. So he's on the C, and he does a quick hammer on pull off between a B flat, a C, and then lands on the target note of B flat right at the moment the B flat chord comes around. So right? And then that note I just added in, you'll see down here at the 10th fret, is an A note, and guess when he switched to it? Right when we get onto our A chord, right? Now he does an interesting note here that might not be the first choice for an A chord. Tone. Now he does some neat things with his chicken picking here starting. So he lands on the A. You see this little X here. So what I'm doing is I'm hitting that with my thumb on the second string, and then coming back up with my index finger. So that's what he does there. So it's like, really simple if we've practiced that chicken picking we were talking about before. And it's very slow. This one, there's nothing really quick about it. So okay, so all around chord tones, except a really neat kind of tension note he throws in there. Okay, so little passing tone from our G sharp, which would be the 7th of an A minor, but A minor, A major. Again, we're not really getting that. He doesn't spend enough time on that G sharp to note to really create that underlying tonality. But anyway, so that phrase. Some of these notes he plays extremely quiet too, and so there's another little mute here. That's fine. I mean, we can put that in or not. It's not going to make or break the solo, right? Now the chords change. So the second half of this solo, he goes 2 bars of F, 2 bars of C, 2 bars of B flat, and then back to a D minor. These are all diatonic, basically a 1, 4, 5, 6 chord progression in the key of F, right? But based around the first chord, because now we're changing the tonality kind of to be more focused on F, right? So he does something really neat here. He kind of cops a pedal steel kind of country lick. And it's really interesting. A lot of people look at this lick. So there's the pedal steel kind of an effect, right? Okay. Well, what's actually happening here? Well, we know that we're on an F chord. So again, if we come up here and do a very high F bar chord over all 6 strings up at the 13th fret, if we take the top 3 strings of that, it's the 14th fret, 13th fret, 13th fret. We have an A, a C, and an F. There's our little F major triad. Well, all he's doing here is he is barring at the 13th fret. I use my pinky, and there's a reason why I use my pinky for this. Because it allows me, and some people find it tough to bar with the pinky, but it allows me to do my bend here much more solid by getting my 3 fingers, my other 2 fingers in behind to help with that bend. A lot of folks try to bend just with 1 finger, and it's really difficult, right? So I get all 3 fingers and I have my bar here. What it allows me to do is bend up. I have my bar ready to go. Very important you get that note very crisp onto the A though. Because what's happening is we're turning this into an A right here. And then we've got our C and our F to create, let's see, our F major triad. So really what he's doing here is he's going chord tone up to A, holds the C, comes in, works back down it, brings the bend back down. So I just hold that bend the whole time. He stops it though. Can do that with my picking hand, right? So I don't have to leave that bend, because you'll see this second bend here starts bent up. The straight line on the bend tells you it's already bent, right? Okay? So we can see how that is, again, playing over chord tones, right? And then he lands on the F, right? The tonic of the chord he's playing over top of. Okay, next chord is C. Well, look what he does. He outlines a little C major triad, right? It'll be the same as playing this, just an octave higher. It's that little D shape everybody knows, just moved up the fretboard, right, to C. So C chord, does a little slide into it. All right, knowing the B flat's coming up. So he takes that C note he's on, but he bends it up to a D, which is a note within the chord of B flat, and he goes between a B flat note and the note up to D. So both chord tones within B flat. So really thought out. He's really playing around the changes. Goes back to a D minor, and basically this lick here, kind of right here, goes into a real typical kind of pentatonic idea. Now the way I'm picking that, I'm going index finger and a pull off, thumb, index, and thumb, and then index, thumb, kind of like alternate picking, but with those two as my downs and ups. Okay. Now the chord progression here, he does a quick little B flat to C, and he outlines the chords again. So here's our B flat, and he does this little run. Literally just playing a B flat arpeggio, moves it up to C, the same shape, outlining a C major chord, but he adds a couple other scale tones in there. Back to our B flat, and he outlines that same B flat major arpeggio again. And then when it goes back to C, he finally goes up and just plays kind of a, which would land back on our D minor, thus landing on the D. So this is just more from the D minor pentatonic. Again, here's that bend that I was talking about up here with the pedal steel style licks, right? But I bend, hold it, so basically then, that entire solo and that's how I would play that, and a little bit of an analysis of that. All right, well, let's dive into the second solo. Now, this is the really kind of classic one that has the that classic little arpeggiated lick at the end that everybody knows and loves so much. And this one's based around a different set of chords now, mind you. So he has a measure of D minor, wherever you want to play that, D minor to B flat to C, but he plays almost a full measure of D minor, but he changes to the B flat on the and of beat 4 on the up, so it's syncopated, right? So it's 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1. And the C, for 2 bars at the end, ends up just, see, I'm always switching on the up there, ends up just on the 1 again. So 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and... Okay? Totally diatonic to D minor. So we could play D minor scale, D minor pentatonic, which is what he does a lot. Any of these types of things, okay? So let's dive in and see what he does again. So he starts this off with this little lick here. Very pentatonic based, right? You can kind of see it. Okay. Once he's on the B flat, he kind of focuses on the F note and the D again, which are chord tones, right? And on the D minor chord, he bends up to an A and an F, which, again, chord tones. Okay. Once it switches to the C, he does this neat little kind of rolling motion of hammer-ons and pull-offs, really kind of played choppy and staccato that kind of outline some of the chord tones from C, and you'll see why here. So if I bend this first note up, you would think if we're going to play in the pentatonic that I would go, but he doesn't. He goes back to the 9th fret. There's a reason for it. Within the C major that we're playing over top of, F is not one of the chord tones. In fact, it's kind of a note you oftentimes avoid, the 4th interval of that chord. So he goes back to the E instead, because it's one of the notes within the chord, right? So that lick is... If you notice, I notated a staccato on all the end notes after the hammer-on pull-off. So I'll either do that by releasing the pressure on this hand or getting my index finger back on the string. So far... And that last one we can kind of hold longer. Right, and the picking is either index or thumb, whatever feels most comfortable. Now this is where it gets interesting. He goes back to a D minor, and here's some more of this chicken picking. These two little mutes here, setting up what's one of the faster licks we've seen so far. That's really important though. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the thumb index on the mute and then thumb back down on the actual 10th fret note before a pull off to give our picking hand a rest. So if that's something that's tricky to you, you can just practice those 4 notes, or even just the... right, until we're comfortable with it, and then add the pull off in. And then I go up to the F note with my thumb on the 3rd string. Okay, so... All right. Now he does a little slide in. That's over our D minor, and we land on the D note on the B flat. Again, chord tone, right? That's in there. That's his 3rd, right, interval. So there's your B flat chord. As he heads into the C now, he does this little fast outline of an arpeggio, sort of, but it's not quite as obvious. He leads into it with a slide into the 9th fret. Now you might say, well, that doesn't look like an arpeggio, but if you look at what I'm playing here, that's a C major chord, right? So he's playing the 9th fret E, which is part of the chord, the G, does a quick hammer on and pull off, 16th notes, back to the G, back to the E, to the C. Now the way I handle this, because it's so quick and smooth, and I don't know if Mark actually plays it this way, but I'm going to do it this way. I do my slide in with my thumb picking the string into the 9th. I hit my index finger on the 2nd string, do my hammer on and pull off. How do I do this? Okay, I'm using my middle finger to pick the C up on the high E string. Then I don't pick the 10 and the 8 right here. I actually do a hammer on from nowhere here to get a really smooth sound. So watch. If you watch my picking hand there, and that allows me to not even have to move this. I keep my bar in place to get all the notes ringing together. And then just does some mutes at the end. Not really important where those are. Okay, so that's kind of a cool little lick. And again, just break it down into small chunks, right? and just take it slowly until you feel like you can get it up to speed, right? Now, this next one is a really cool little pentatonic chicken picking run, okay? Very typical. If I was to grab a pick, you've seen this played in a lot of blues type of things. Has such a different sound with the pick, though. I'm not playing that right. Okay. So with the chicken picking thing, what I'm doing here is I'm going thumb, bend, thumb again on the second string, and then index finger. So okay. And then thumb again. So thumb, thumb, index, thumb, pull off, thumb, index. Thumb, pull off, thumb, index, thumb, hammer on, middle, index, middle. Okay, so that whole lick. The neat thing about this is you can really kind of choke the notes with this chicken picking, right? And kind of, with the fretting hand, maybe release the pressure in between to get that really kind of choked out chicken picking sound to it. It's a great little run. And again, you can play it very slowly to get a feel for it, right? Well, make sure you get the hammer-ons and pull-offs in there, right? See how some of the notes I'm just choking out and making them mutes? We could just... I almost find it sounds better like that. It's kind of how Mark actually, I think, plays it a lot. So that's a great little run, all based around our simple D minor scale, right? So that's awesome. Then he kind of just takes a break there. He lands on a G note and then a little bit of rest, right? So he ends up landing on the C chord. Right before that, he does this neat little thing where he does a really quick back to the chicken picking type of idea, 2 mutes into an A note, 2 mutes into a B flat, right? And still being on the C chord, what he does here again is he does like a sort of a pedal steel idea again. He takes a B flat note but bends it up to C, and at the same time holding that, plays an E note. So what you're hearing is a part of a C major triad again. So 11th fret bending up to the C, plays the E up at the 12th fret with his pinky, or I am anyways. Bring that bend back down to a D note here, okay? Now we end up in the most famous part of this solo, and this is the part that a lot of people have a bit of a tough time with. He just outlines a bunch of arpeggios, first of all, okay? The important thing to getting this down is the picking, okay? So how I pick this, it's very important to do, I'm whacking my guitar again, very important to do the pull-off, okay? So I start with my thumb, and the notes are 13th fret and 10th fret, pull-off on the first string, which is just a D minor triad, right? So he's just working around that D minor chord. When he goes to the B flat, he takes the A note here on the second string, moves up to B flat, and that creates now a B flat major triad, right? So, I mean, that's that little D shape. So, then when he goes up to the C chord, he just moves that shape up 2 frets to. So these are these typical little sweeping right? If we were going to play a metal version of Sultans of Swing, maybe. But what he does, he just takes the first 2 strings to that. Now, the picking is the important part. So I go thumb and then pull off. And that allows my thumb time to get back here. So it's thumb, pull off, thumb on the second string, and then index finger, and then repeat. That's it. Okay, that's the whole pattern. And so if you can get that one little phrase going, basically these first 4 notes, we're just going to keep repeating that and moving this hand, our fretting hand, around. So that's what you need. And the beauty of it is, because of the motion of the fingers, we mute the strings out so we can just keep this kind of planted. Not sure if that's the way Mark actually plays it. It works for me, it always has, and it was kind of an instinctive thing for me. So that's how I would play that. So again, it's just going to be D minor, B flat major, and then he stomps it there to give himself time to get the transition to the C. On the F note here, slide it up, that same pattern. Now that part there, in the version I have and that I was listening to, it fades out as he's going through this arpeggio pattern. So we don't really hear anything after that. So basically that solo then. You know, and on with that. And that's basically the gist of it. So I don't know. What do you guys think? I hope that helps you to kind of understand what Mark was doing within the solo harmonically, playing around with so many arpeggio shapes, right? We can kind of tend to think more scale-like a lot of times, and this is a real testament to how playing with arpeggios over changes can be a wonderful way of playing. And much more melodic, because we hit these target notes that we want, the chord tones more, right? So. And I hope I was clear about some of the picking techniques I use. Like I said, it's a little bit more fly by the seat of your pants type stuff here with a lot of this and sort of figuring what works best for each particular lick. But I hope that gives you a little bit of a glimpse into something that could help you to do it. It's a fun style to play, and I utilize this a lot of times, you know, when I want to get something a little bit different, just always grabbing a pick and playing really quick and getting through things like that. So anyways, I hope that helped, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to put a link to the video I did way back, actually, of myself playing the Sultans of Swing solo. A lot of people questioned why I was using a Les Paul style guitar. For this one, we all know he used a Strat. And the reason was my Strats have not fully floating bridges, but vintage style bridges that don't allow me to get a lot of... When I do this bend here and then go play other notes, those other notes are out of tune. It's really awful to do. So this is a fixed bridge. It has the P90s. I was able to get the tone that was sort of similar, right? But it allows me to get those double stop bends going without being out of tune. So that's the reason why. So please don't comment on the fact it's not a Strat. I know. All right. So anyways, thanks so much for tuning in, guys. I'll put the link to the performance video from way back. You guys can go watch me play it and sort of see how I utilize some of the ideas within it over the backing track. And anyways, yeah, thanks so much for tuning in. Please leave your comments for me. I'm always happy to discuss some of the ideas we talked about here. And like the video, share it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Really appreciate all your support, and I'll be back again soon with some more content. Ciao for now. Thanks for tuning in.